Mr. Schwartz is going to join us shortly. He, coming in, had something fall off of a truck in front of him. Okay, but he's running a few minutes late because of that. But by the time, hopefully he'll be here before we get too far into our agenda. The good thing is that he is safe at this point. And as soon as Dr. Mills returns. Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education for March 15th, 2021 to order. Members of the board, before you is the agenda which needs to be approved. The chair will entertain a motion. Mrs. Powell.
I move we approve the agenda for the March 15th, 2021 Wilson County School Board of Education meeting. Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mrs. Barnes that we approve the agenda for the March 15th, 2021 Wilson County Board of Education meeting. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mrs. Barnes, please cast your vote.
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Borkin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence to be led today by Mrs. Barnes.
Please join me. I pledge. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnes. Members of the board, we have in your packet the minutes of February 15th, 2021, which was a regular board meeting, and March 8th, 2021, which was a special board meeting. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes.
I move that we approve the minutes of February 15th regular board meeting and the March 8th special board meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Mrs. Barnes. I'll give the second to Mr. Boykin that we approve the February 15th, 2021 regular board meeting minutes and approve the March 8th, 2021 special board meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Members of the board, let me go back to announce to our public that the meeting is being held remotely through the Zoom video conferencing platform. The following board members are present in the boardroom: Mrs. Boyette, Mr. Borkin, Mr. Breen, Mr. Mercer, and myself. And the board members meeting remotely are Mrs. Barnes and Mrs. Powell. The meeting is being televised on Spectrum and Greenlight Channel 22 and live streamed through the Wilson County Schools YouTube channel. The public can also view the meeting through links on the Wilson County Schools Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages and the Wilson County Schools website. Based on the executive orders from the governor, face coverings must be worn during the board meetings. Therefore, all persons who are present in the boardroom are following directives and are masked. Next on the agenda is the chairman's report. I have nothing outstanding today to report. I again thank all those who have helped to ensure that the vaccinations of our staff went well. We know that the second vaccinations will be received on the 31st of March, and we hope that that too will go as smoothly as all of the other clinics have gone. And I think we have at least given that initial comfort level to our staff in knowing that they are building their immunity from the coronavirus. And so we look forward to that next shot in the arm that will be coming. Other than that, Dr. Mills, I will turn it over to you for Superintendent's report.
Madam Chair, board members, and others, it's nice to see students back in all of our buildings. As you know, we had students return face-to-face instruction on February 22nd, and high school and early college came back the week of March 1st. Spectrum News featured Wilson County Schools teacher year Tyler Brown as he got ready for his students to come back to Watt. Principal Crystal Cox was also featured in the segment, and I thought they did a really great job of conveying the excitement of having students back in face-to-face instruction for the first time in a year, which is really weird to think of. We were also very pleased with the recent article in the Wilson Times featuring William Horn. Mr. Horn has been driving a bus on and off for 47 years, ever since he was 16 years old. Mr. Horn has driven almost all of our bus routes over the years and currently drives an exceptional children's bus. I thought it was a really nice article that portrayed how dedicated our drivers are and what they do and how much we really appreciate them. And it's good to see buses out on the road again as well too. I wanted to take a minute to again thank the Wilson County Health Department and Carolina Family Health Centers for administering the COVID-19 vaccines to our teachers and staff on March 3rd. That was the district-wide vaccine clinic held at Fike High School. It's really nice to have the partnership that we do with them, and I've heard nothing but positive comments about how the event went overall for the clinic. In total, 686 vaccines were administered, and I would like to recognize personally Assistant Superintendent Dr. Ben Williams for his role in our school safety efforts since the pandemic began and for coordinating with our healthcare partners to ensure the successful vaccine clinic. He did a lot behind the scenes to make that happen, and we really appreciate his leadership through that process and being part of our team as well. I wanted to also recognize several principals and assistant principals for their participation in the 2020-2021 Distinguished Leadership in a Remote Learning Environment program. That's sponsored through the Department of Public Instruction and is developed and provided by the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association. NCPAPA is where you may have heard that before. This program was developed to help administrators successfully navigate the instructional leadership challenges they faced during the pandemic. And so we had a group of administrators who completed the program, and I'd like to recognize them because it's a good thing that they participated in this and set a standard. Annette Faison, the principal at Frederick Douglass; Sharon Honeycutt, principal at Wells; Christine Lane, the assistant principal at Wells; Eddie Dahl, principal at Hunt; Deb Rogers, assistant principal at Hunt; Matt Creighton, the assistant principal at Hunt; Jennifer Parker, principal at Darden; Marcus Speld, principal at Springfield Middle; and Dr. Katrina Fowler, assistant principal at Springfield Middle. We had a big crowd. Congratulations to them for their efforts, and we're fortunate to have folks that would take the extra step and do that training. And NCPAPA does a really good job with their training with programs for current and future administrators at all levels, and we're really glad to have that available for our folks to take part in. I'd also like to recognize our Director of Technology, Matthew Mayo, who I think is on the Zoom call, for his selection as the North Central Region candidate for the 2021 North Carolina Technology Director of the Year Award. He was one of 8 finalists in the running for the state award. He's a leader in instructional technology, not just here in Wilson, but across the entire state. He's only been here for 8 months, but he's accomplished so much in that time. It really feels like he's been here longer, and it maybe does feel longer considering all the things we've had to figure out with technology that he's led us through. We're really glad to have him back, and we applaud his leadership and his expertise and his dedication to our staff and students. He is one of the nicest and funniest guys if you ever get a chance to sit in a meeting with him or interact with him. The technology department had a reception for him on March 5th, and it was great to be there to celebrate him and get together in a small group, I might add. At last month's board meeting, we shared with the board information about opportunity culture, which is a staffing model that restructures schools to extend the reach of excellent teachers, instructional assistants, and principals. We'll be implementing opportunity culture in 10 of our schools during this first cohort. So we're excited to share the application process is now open for teachers and instructional assistants. So I want to encourage all of our staff to apply, as well as educators outside of our district to apply, but certainly our own folks. And it's a great opportunity to reach more, achieve more, and earn more. And so the online website for applications is leadwithwcs.net. And so I'd encourage folks to take a look at that. We're starting to have conversations with our high school principals about possible scenarios that we may implement regarding proms and graduation ceremonies this year. We were able to get some principals to get some feedback from their stakeholders about possible options. And so while it's still early and there's things that could change with some of the requirements and regulations and what's in the toolkit for North Carolina schools, we are looking at wanting to hold a prom where the event could be held inside the school gym or large gathering space. Now that our gyms are air conditioned thanks to county commissioners, we could hold the prom inside there to eliminate issues. We could look at scheduling different times for attendance, and a process would be implemented to do that. And we could have students and staff register online so we could have a record. And again, we'd have to follow the same safety and health guidelines, but I know that's something that starts being discussed this time of year, and we'll get some more formal information as we go. Again, I am hopeful that the state will make some changes to some of the regs right now that will allow more gatherings that may not be applicable to school gatherings versus social gatherings at schools. So that's something we're looking at. Graduation for our comprehensive high schools, that event could be held outside in the football stadium. We could look at holding graduation ceremonies simultaneously. Our graduation date is June 12th, and so we could look at a weather date of June 19th. Tickets would still be something that we would look at doing based on available seating. And again, you'd have to follow health and safety guidelines. Early colleges, their graduation could be inside the school facility, and that graduation date is May 15th. That's coming up very quickly. Again, same thing with some of the tickets and the guidelines, but these are just options at this time, but I think it's important for our parents and students and the public to know that that's something we're working on already. There are still some roadblocks we have to work through, but I think they're much more manageable this year than they were last year. And there's things we've learned from putting on the events last year, at least the graduations, that we could use as a fallback. But again, I wanted to make the board aware and the public aware that's something we're talking about. We can bring more back very, very soon. But this is the time of year when a lot of those things are discussed and people start making plans. So I really think that's something that'll be important to do for our students and families as part of the process and social aspects of high school and graduation. So more to come on that. And then last but not least, we talked at our last meeting about a facilities meeting, our next one. And I've looked at the time frame, and we had a policy meeting scheduled for May 10th. So my suggestion would be to use that May 10th meeting as our next policy. Next policy, in lieu of policy, be our next facilities meeting on May 10th at 1 o'clock. That would be here in the boardroom. And Madam Chair, that's all I had.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that the topic for prom and graduation will generate a lot of buzz and interest, so thank you for beginning to have those discussions and bearing in mind that depending on how our numbers in the in the community continue to go, and the guidelines that are given, hopefully that will bring about an opportunity for our students. Next on the agenda is a public input portion of our agenda. We do have a person who has signed up to have their correspondence read. Each person is granted 3 minutes for their presentation. The letter that is being read will be read by our public relations director, Amber Lynch. The portion of the meeting is for the board to hear matters of interest from the public. However, obscene or vulgar statements, personal attacks, and statements reasonably perceived to be disruptive or imminently threatening to the orderly operation of the meeting shall not be permitted. The comments are coming from Tanya K. Skinner regarding high school students. Amber, are you available online at this point?
Yes, Dr. Fitch, I'm here. I
Okay.
just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes,
Yes,
we
ma'am.
can.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to get started reading.
Thank you.
I am a parent of 2 high school students at Fike High School. When high school students were allowed back in the building, my son, who is a 9th grader, was so excited to experience his freshman year. He wanted to go back to school until he found out that in a few of his classes he would be the only student in the classroom. Imagine the anxiety and fear of being alone in a new school without your classmates. As you can imagine, his excitement diminished, and he has been questioning his decision and ultimately asked if he could remain in virtual learning. Then I learned that the students who did return to class were not able to ask questions while in class. They had to email the teachers, which makes no sense if they are in the classroom. It is time to get the high school students back in the classroom for more than 1 day a week. 1 day a week is a joke. 1 day a week says we as a school board do not value the importance of in-person instruction or interaction needed for children to thrive in a learning environment. Let the kids that want to be in school go back for more than 1 day. Surrounding counties have high school students going week on, week off, or on a schedule like our elementary schools have been operating on for months with no problems. High school seniors have spent most of the last 2 years of high school at home. High school freshmen, for some, have never stepped foot in their respective school, which is just heartbreaking. Tanya Skinner.
Thank you very much. Members of the board, you may direct the chairman to respond to the concern on behalf of the board, direct the administration to respond to the concern, refer the matter to a board committee, refer the matter to the administration, or place the matter of concern on the agenda for a future meeting. What is your pleasure?
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes.
I move that we allow the administration to respond.
Members of the board, is that in keeping with what you would like to see happen?
I agree with it.
That's appropriate.
Okay.
Yes, I agree.
Thank you. Dr. Mills, we will ask you to respond to the writer of the email
I'll do that.
so that her questions and comments can be addressed. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, we have discussion, information, action items. Under information, we have 2 basic areas, first being Project REACH, Restoring Every Absent Child's Hope. And then we will be dealing with some administrative regulations, which we know are information-based only. The Project REACH is being led by Dr. Wanda Dawson, who we're happy to have back with us. Anytime she chooses to come, she's been a force to reckon with, and we appreciate having her with us. So I don't know if I'm going to turn it to Dr. Mills or directly over to Dr. Wilson or directly over to Dr. Dawson. What is your pleasure?
Dr. Wilson can take over, and Dr. Dawson, you know, she's so shy, we won't hear from her, but
I know, so shy and retiring, but Dr. Wilson, if you'll lead in, please.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, members of the board and Madam Chair. We had been thinking about the students who we consider at risk. And the person who came to mind who could help us with that most of all was Dr. Dawson. And so we reached out to her, and she is here today to share with you the project. We just had a concept, and Dr. Dawson has taken that concept and has run with it. And I think that you'll see the running that has gone on with it.
Okay. Dr. Dawson.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Good afternoon, board members, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today about Project Reach. Since 2017, I have served in many capacities in the Wilson County School District, but this assignment by far has been the most rewarding. As the director of Project Reach, I have seen how our efforts have resulted in many positive outcomes for our students and families. The Project Reach Task Force consists of 5 social workers, 2 school counselors, 2 behavior specialists, and 1 public relations assistant who serves as interpreter for the Hispanic community. The names of the team members are listed in your information, so I will not go over each of them, but I am sure that you are familiar with most of them and have determined by now that I have a dynamic team. Project Reach was authorized for implementation in January of 2021, and the purpose of the program is to reconnect students and their families to the academic program at their assigned school so that the student can continue a pathway to academic success. We have 23 of the 26 schools included in the project, and the target population included all students with 10 or more absences during the first semester. So when Dr. Wilson and I were talking about how we were going to begin and what population we were going to focus on, she and I came up with the idea that we could get from Stephen Schimmel a list of students that had excessive absences. And so we did 10 or more absences. Of course, some students had as many as 50 or 60, but any absence is not a good absence. And so in talking and meeting with the first members of the team, because I started off with just 4 social workers that currently work for Wilson County Schools. And so we decided that our priorities would be these 3. The first priority would be working with the high school seniors with 25 or more absences who were on track to graduate in June of 2021. We felt that it was important to try to get these kids back reconnected because, of course, you all know that if they don't finish their program and graduate, then that goes against our graduation rate. So we felt like that group should be first priority. And then we looked at the high school students with 10 to 24 absences. And then our third priority, of course, would be all the other students in grades kindergarten through 11th grade who had 10 or more absences. The team that I work with, they get in all of these hours for Project Reach after work and on weekends. And so in their contracts, they were given up to 10 hours per week. And some of them could really work more than that, but their contract says up to 10 hours a week. And so all of this work is done after school hours and on weekends when we're going out to meet with students and parents. So in thinking about the strategies and things that we were going to do to make this program successful, the first thing that we felt that we needed to do was to meet with the school teams, because you know that the principals, the assistant principals, the counselors, and other pertinent staff members were already searching or contacting these students and parents to see what the problem was. So we felt it was important to meet with them first. And then during these discussions, we had in-depth conversations about each student's academic performance and their attendance. And then we also discussed if there were any special circumstances regarding the student. We reviewed the actions that the school team had already taken, and then we began to discuss additional steps that we as a task force could take to reconnect the student. So Project Reach team then follows up by contacting the parents and the students, either by phone, email, and mostly home visits. When visiting these families, if there's no one at home, we usually leave a card or a letter letting them know that we've been there, and we leave contact information on that document. And the team will repeat these actions until the student is actively engaged in instruction. And so one of the Project Reach team members may go to a house 10 times. It may take that. We're not going to give up. We continue to knock on the door, call, email until we get some response. And some of the things that the Project Reach team has done after school hours is that they've delivered Chromebooks, they've delivered hotspots, they've delivered paper packets, they help in finding resources for food, shelter, and clothing, because there are a lot of stories that we've heard during this period of time and working with these families. And, you know, some of them are homeless. They may be staying with a grandmother or an aunt or uncle who doesn't have internet. So there are a lot of things, but our social workers and the team members provide resources. We provide resources for individual and family counseling if that's needed. We contact extended family members and friends when all other contacts are exhausted. And what we found by having such a wide variety of folk on the team, a lot of times the social worker who's working on that particular case may not know the aunt or the uncle or a grandmother or someone in the community, but there's another person on the team that says, oh, I know her, I go to church with her, or I'm in a group with her. And so that's proven to be very helpful. We also assist parents and students with technology issues. We've had social workers and principals and guidance counselors who have said they've been to homes, and parents say, I don't know how to get on, I don't know how to connect to the class. And so we're right there in the yard, showing them what to do. We assist parents with completing paperwork for face-to-face instruction or virtual academy or technology requests. And we even have some of our team members who serve as mentors, particularly to high school students. We had, for example, one high school student who was not engaged. And when we talked with that student, we found that she had an interest in being a cosmetologist. Well, one of our team members has a degree in cosmetology. And so we connected that team member with the student in order to discuss educationally what is needed to become a cosmetologist. And so as a result of that, this student is back actively engaged. I will say that all our services are delivered with persistence, perseverance, determination, and dedication. And so when I talked to Dr. Wilson, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, and she told me that she wanted me to do a board report, then I began to think about how could I best represent the success of the program. Now, by no means am I Dr. Mills, because he's a statistician. I just did get by in statistics with a B. Anyway, we looked at what do we consider success in this program. And so we considered success in the following ways. If we found out that a child was no longer enrolled in the district, and that was confirmed and verified that they were enrolled in another school district, then we could say we no longer have to keep this child on the roll and these absences continue. Engaged in remote learning with continued support and encouragement was another success. And then being independently engaged in remote learning. That's that child that we were able to get back online and who the teacher doesn't have to contact every other day to say, Johnny, don't forget, you need to do this or that. And then another success is that the students came back face to face. And that eliminated them being absent out of class. And then being on track to graduate June of 2021. And so in doing that, I put together a chart, and you will see that, and each alphabet represents a school. And so if you look at the percentages, you will see that at most of our schools, we've had quite a bit of success in getting these kids reconnected. By all means, we have not taken care of everybody, but we, I think, are doing a fine job in trying to get these kids back connected with their academic program. Our overall success rate for what we've done from January up until now is 75% success. And so we are extremely proud of the work that we have done to reconnect students and their families. In your information, you will see some quotes from principals and team members. You can read what people are saying about Project Reach, and there are many stories that I could tell you, but I won't take up any more of your time. But please feel free to contact me at any time or any of the folk that are on our team. In closing, I just want to say that the Project Reach Task Force would like to say we appreciate the Wilson County School Superintendent's Cabinet for identifying the need to reconnect the students and families as a top priority. We appreciate the Wilson County Schools Cabinet, Superintendent's Cabinet, for providing the funding for the project. We appreciate the principals and their school teams for working in conjunction and collaboration with us. We appreciate the HR department for processing the paperwork for the employees that were hired. And we also appreciate all outside agencies who have assisted the Project Reach team with resources for our families. And so we will continue to work as hard as we've been working since January. And our goal now is, and always has been, is to get all our kids that have these excessive absences back involved. Do you have any questions?
Members of the board, do you have any questions for Dr. Dawson?
I have a comment. This is Velma
Mrs.
Barnes. It is just good to see Dr. Dawson, and it's great to have her spearhead any program that we have in Wilson County, because she is a dedicated individual, and you can add another P to your services, and that is precision, because you have really dealt with this program with precision, and I hope that you can share it with other counties. And as someone quoted, it is a really fitting title, Reach, and I want to thank you personally.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
And I have a comment also.
Mrs. Powell?
Chair. I'm thankful for this Project Reach. Thank you, Dr. Dawson. Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Because about a month and a half ago, I had a conversation with Representative Cooper Suggs, Linda Cooper Suggs, and she was telling me she had been approached, people asking her questions about inquiring about our students during the pandemic. And one of the questions was, do we know the number of students who are lost in this process, the number of students that have had to help support their families and not attend school? And for whatever reason, maybe they just were having, academic difficulties in their classes. And are our social workers, another question was, are they going out to the schools to find out, or to the homes to find out what's going on with that child? And I told her, I know they are, and the social workers and teachers are. This answers a lot of questions, and the fact that I think that we're communicating with the parents, the grandparents, that's what it's all about. You're on point with that, you know, getting the whole family involved in it. And I'll just add a couple. I could go on and on about this. I love this program. But the other thing, I like the comments too. The one that Crystal Jones, social worker, said, slow and steady wins the race. That is so true. Not to do anything in haste, to take our time and cover all our avenues. That's what you all are doing. And also, Tammy Yates said, reach out to our students and parents. That is necessary. So the social workers have the hearts to get into this and really pull through and do what they need to do. And thank you so much. And this I think will help us in the long run.
Yeah, I've talked to some other retired folk in other districts, and you know, we always keep up with kind of what's going on in the counties that we retired from, and I hear a lot from them that the same thing is going on in other counties, but unlike Wilson, they have not dedicated money and personnel to deal with this. And so I always tell them, I said, well, you know how Wilson, they believe in the children. And so it makes a difference when you believe in your children and you want to do what is best for them. And I will tell you that, yeah, we've had people, you know, look out the window and they don't, you know, they see who it is and they won't come to the door. But that does not deter us. We're going back and we're going to continue. We're going to talk to that student that is working during the day and try to encourage them, continue to encourage them to do your work at night, you know. And some of them, like I said, there are a whole lot of stories. You know, some of these kids are working and helping to support their families. But with the guidance counselors added to the group, they are able to coach them and tell them how you can still do this and work too. And so it's we still have, you know, some children to bring in, but we're not going to give up on this. And we just appreciate Wilson County Schools being forward thinkers. And I thank Dr. Wilson for thinking about me.
Yes, and I have one more comment too. I was thinking about back in the day, my uncle, God rest his soul, he had to quit school in 5th grade to stay home and support his families. And things like this were not, you know, were not available back then, and they are now. So that's what makes me even happier, that you can still have a way of getting your education in while working. So thank you.
Well, I think we oftentimes underestimate the worth of our social workers and the wonderful work that they do.
Yes.
Yes.
This is a beginning process that I'm sure, as things are available, hopefully can continue to expand, because the focus here was on missing classes, but there's so many other needs that our students have that need to be addressed, and the resources need to help be lined up so that the parents can be directed toward. So this is a wonderful undertaking. It's a continuation of the wonderful work that our social workers have been doing all along, and I applaud them and their efforts. I thank Dr. Mills and Dr. Wilson and the rest of the superintendent's cabinet for taking this bold step, for reaching out to Dr. Dawson for that persistence that in all the other P's that were mentioned. But we thank you, we thank you, we thank you. We hope that this helps to put our students back on track, because as everywhere, there has been a lot of loss with this pandemic situation. And we need to make sure we've done a yeoman's task of making sure our kids have been fed. But this is another one of those tools in the toolbox to help our students be successful. So we thank you so very much for all that that you do with that. Are there any other comments or any questions that other board members have? Mrs. Boyette?
Mrs. Dawson, Dr. Dawson, let me say, I'm sure that your encouragement made the difference in those students. They decided, hey, these people are here to help me, or either they decided, I am going to get busy, so these people will stop worrying me to death. So I do appreciate it. One question, did you combine some of the schools? I see 5 middle schools listed, and I think there's 6, and
Yes.
then in the high schools, there are 4, and did you combine Watt and Wacka or whatever?
Now, 2 of the one middle school was not in the project. And then there was 1 middle school that I listed that just got in the project on March the 4th. And so I did not put their data in because it was just too soon. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the other there was a middle school that was not involved, but is involved in the project now. But from the beginning, that person's school did not list any children on the information that we were given that had missed 10 or more days. But I reached out to that principal, and that school is now part of the project, and we will be meeting with them on Wednesday.
Okay, thank you.
And then as far as, we had 1 student at one of the non-traditional high schools, and then the other non-traditional high school, there were no issues. And then the information for the high schools is just for the seniors because that was our priority. We still right now, are working with the 9th through 11th graders at those high schools, but they had only been in the program about 2 weeks. And so when I do another report, probably in May or so, then those numbers will be included in that report.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Dr. Dawson, we thank you. As always, we welcome you back to Wilson County Schools. We look forward to the continued work that you and this dynamic group will be doing, and we look forward to the next report that will come from you within the next couple of months, because you talk about May, so we're middle of March now, so.
I know. I'm thinking May or June, at least before the end of school.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, I would tell Dr. Dawson, I give her a hard time, but when Dr. Wilson and I sat down to meet about this and figure out what we're going to do, we had talked individually, so we sat down to plan, and we said we need somebody to oversee this, and we both had her name down at the top of our list on 2 separate pieces of paper, and as you can see, it's like Ms. Boyette said, Dr. Dawson is going to be one of those people that's going to support you to get you there or bug you to death, so you will, so she'll leave you alone, and that's exactly what you need. And the ironic thing was when we compared notes, she was the first name on both of our lists separately. So Wanda, it's always good to see you, and thank you for all you and your team did. So I'm glad to have your help.
And I would say you all see the names of the team in your report. So if you see any of them, just give them a thank you, because
Sure.
I'm telling you, they are phenomenal. They are fantastic. They work so hard. They really, really do. And so if you see them at any time, just tell them, please just tell them thank you. And I tell them that all the time, but you can never say thank you to a person too many times.
Correct.
That's right.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda are the other informational items. They are administrative regulations. There are 5 that have been placed in your packet. As you know, these come to us as information and not as action, but if there are any questions at this point, Dr. Mills, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Madam Chair, we have a handful of the regs are, again, are for information, and I would just ask if you had any questions or points that you saw as we provide these to you for information. I'm trying to scroll through. Let's
Can
see.
I ask a quick question
Mhm.
on the second administrative reg, 6305, transportation safety assistance and bus monitors?
Mhm.
What is the base difference between the safety assistant, transportation safety assistant, and the bus monitor?
Let me see if I can pull it up. Dr. Williams is on the call, and Mr. Harvey, I believe.
Gentlemen, if you would unmute your mic, your
Trying to get
mics.
to the point.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Harvey, I'll let you answer that question, sir.
Yes, sir. And good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the board. The difference between the two is the transportation bus monitor that's really EC specific. And the safety assistant can assist with transportation needs in any capacity.
Okay, all right. But the duties kind of overlap, or they're totally separate?
Yes, ma'am. There are overlapping duties, and it's typically based on need. Naturally, the monitor would have, I guess, a little bit more to do on a day-to-day basis, just depending on the needs of the EC children that they serve.
Okay. Ms. Boyette?
Yes, on that same one, if you'll scroll back up to,
What line
like
are we in?
125 or 121, your
Bus monitors?
bus monitors, right. It says volunteers may serve as bus monitors in accordance with the following rules. But doesn't that volunteer have to be an employee of the school, or has it changed? So I thought that non-school employees could not get on a yellow bus.
I don't think they can.
So when a volunteer wouldn't mean a member of.
No, so we need, so clarifying that on that reg would probably be a good thing from what you're saying. Yeah, we can make that adjustment. Yeah, because that's two separate lines of processes, yeah.
And the only other one was on that same one, on line 35, if you, I may not understand something. It says, pursuant to state law, a transportation safety assistant should be either an adult or a certified student driver. I was thinking, or, shouldn't it be and? What's the certified student driver? I would still think it would have to be an adult.
Which line is that?
That's on line 35.
35. Adult or and a available substitute bus driver. I guess the certified student driver, they would still be an adult in that context, because you'd have to be an adult to drive a
I was
bus.
gonna say a student,
So it should be, I think you're right, it should be and, that's a good catch.
because a certified student driver who
Certain-
is available as a substitute bus driver, but we no longer have,
No, when I was reading it, I was reading it thinking student.
That's what I was
I was
thinking
thinking,
about today.
my daughter's a student driver, no way, no way. So, yeah, okay, yes, it's, based on the rest of that sentence, it should be and.
so pursuant to state law, a transportation safety assistant should be
Either an adult.
either an adult
We'll have to rework that line.
and yes, this is,
Should be driver of students rather than certified student driver.
I've got down to rework line 35 on that.
okay.
The volunteer one to me was is more confusing, so that definitely.
what is it, they have to have their CPL license, so I'm sure that as you rework that,
Yeah,
you'll get the
we can
language.
address that.
Are there any other questions or comments in regard to the administrative regulations?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Powell?
The, let's see, Administrative Regulation 5050R,
Okay,
let's see, line 117
all right.
through 119, where it's talking about parents. Just a question, teachers, they also have kids they have to pick up after school too. Are there also some type of procedure set in here for the teachers who may have to leave to go pick up their students, or is that a different rig I'm thinking about? It says parents with children after school program should be advised to make plans to pick the children up from the school they attend at the early dismissal time, or notify the school that their children should ride the assigned afternoon bus.
I think that was geared specifically to the after-school care program, but you could change some of that language to address all, because that's already done, that's in here and it already.
Okay.
I see what you're saying there.
Because
Yeah,
some of our teachers have their children within the,
Many of our folks do. Okay. We can do that.
so you'll clean up some language
We
there?
can take a look at that for clarity.
All right. Mr. Mercer?
It's kind of vague, but they need, the parent needs to let them know what the decision is about that early dismissal in advance, it looks like.
We'll take a look at that one.
Are there other questions or comments in regard to any of the 5 regulations that are before us? Any regarding 6305, transportation safety, assistance and bus monitors? I'm sorry, we did that one already. Any regarding 6340, safety standards for contracted commercial bus transportation services, or 6510, authorized use of equipment, materials, and supplies, or 6540, management of hazardous materials and hazardous waste.
I have a question, Dr. Fitch.
Yes,
And this
ma'am.
is 6340, line 35, and it says immediately before departure, the principal designee shall be responsible for conducting a pre-departure check and completing the pre-departure checklist. What does that consist of, Dr. Mills?
Mr. Harvey will have to give us that information.
Mr. Harvey?
Which of your policies is that, Mrs. Barnes?
That's,
This is 6340.
6340, and
Line 35.
line 35. There's something about these lines 35 that popping up here.
I think he can give you a general description.
Yes, Ms. Barnes. The designee in this case would be the bus driver, and they're responsible for making sure that everything on the bus is operational and functioning appropriately before they leave a school campus, checking stop arms, lights, air brakes, and things of that nature, just to make sure there are no mechanical issues prior to leaving. And that pre-trip check is done before the bus leaves a school campus or transportation. So whenever a bus leaves from any destination, a pre-trip check is conducted by the driver. If there is an issue at that point, the driver will contact transportation to have that issue addressed before students leave campuses or wherever they are, field trips or anything of that nature.
Okay.
Other questions? Hearing none,
Madam Chair.
oh, I'm
I
sorry.
may have some answers to some of the questions that were raised.
All right, Mr.
As
Schwartz.
As far as the question Ms. Ware raised about volunteers being allowed on yellow buses, the law at 115C245C says the driver of any school bus shall permit no person to ride upon such school bus except pupils or school employees assigned thereto, or persons permitted by the express direction of the superintendent or superintendent's designee to ride thereon. So volunteers would be allowed at the direction of the superintendent to ride on the bus.
Never had a request.
What's that?
No, I've never had a request.
Yeah. But you had the issue of whether volunteers could be bus monitors. I thought, my understanding of the question was, could volunteers be bus monitors if volunteers aren't allowed on the bus, if they're not employees? And the answer to that is yes, they could be.
It could be, that would be recommended practice, though.
Right. And then the language about either an adult or a certified student driver is straight out of the statute. It says the safety assistant should be either an adult or a certified student driver who is available as a substitute bus driver.
So, a certified student driver, even though it's straight out of the statute, we don't have students driving buses anymore.
You don't, but it's allowed by law.
That'd be a no. That'd be a no. That's one of those cases where law hasn't caught up with practice.
Yep.
Okay. Well, we know
Might
that
leave my
we're not
hand
gonna
in
have
there.
student drivers, so.
Might slip the end in there.
Yeah,
A little safer.
we want adults.
Yeah.
Yes. Those days passed a long time ago. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any like on that.
So, does
Again,
that
these-
mean that they
these
do
are
not make
regs,
any
so-
changes on that comment, Mr. Schwartz, since they talked about cleaning up the language there with that certified student driver? So we just leave it as it is because that's the language of the law, or?
You can leave it or change it. Totally up to you what you want, totally up to administration what you want to do on this.
But I know what the intent is for not to have students in that role, so we can, the language is better as and.
Okay. All right. Any other questions in regard to the administrative regulations? Hearing none, we'll move to the action items. The first one is the governor's emergency education gear funds.
Dr. Wilson and Ms. May can walk us through that while I get to it, Dr. Fitch.
All right, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, ma'am. We have received some additional funds based on Ms. May's application for PRC 169 and 170, and she was going to share with us how we have our plans to spend the money. Prior to us being able to spend this money, we need to have approval of the board.
Okay. Ms. May, if you will unmute yourself, welcome to the meeting.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. So I will be providing an overview for you of the main components of our GER application, the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. So within that fund, there are two program report codes. The first is 169, and that funding is set aside for specialized instructional support. The allotment manual for COVID-related funds specifies that with this funding, we have to focus on social workers, psychologists, counselors, and nurses. So we just heard about the wonderful work of Project Reach and that group that is out doing that work and finding students and getting them re-engaged. So as we looked at this allotment of $288,000, $615, after consultation with district staff and senior staff, the proposal for PRC 169 is to hire a mental health coordinator that will lead the implementation of the state board policy on mental health and social and emotional learning, and also to hire a lead social and emotional learning psychologist that will work collaboratively with the mental health coordinator and will focus solely on ensuring that the social and emotional needs of our students are met. So primarily the funding in that pot, PRC 169, will be spent on those two positions. There is a new mental health state policy that goes into effect in July this summer. And so those positions would work collaboratively to create and monitor the implementation of the district's mental health improvement plan. PRC 170 is the total amount of that allocation is $176,596. And that funding is specifically set aside for supplemental instructional services. So when we originally were planning for this funding, it was before House Bill 82 was on the table, so to speak. And so what we have written this portion of the grant for is to provide supplemental services this summer for our kindergarten, 4th, and 5th graders. So as you all know, summer reading camp funds supplemental summer instruction for our at-risk students in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. So this funding will be used to expand our summer program so that we can include at-risk students that are currently in kindergarten, 4th grade, and 5th grade. In addition, we are also going to use part of this money to host a Jumpstart program for our rising 6th grade students, our students that are going to middle school for the first time, to help ensure a smooth transition for those students. So we are seeking approval from the board to move forward with submitting the application for these funds.
I received, I'm not sure if the other board members had received an email asking that we hire nurses at each of the schools in the system because of these CARES Act or whatever special funding there was. But we know that these are one-time funds and they're not long-term funds, that they're not continuation funds, so that having the nurses may not be the best utilization, and with the issues that are developing and being made known because of the isolation of many of our students, that the mental health piece is the core focus area at this particular point. So though we would love to have a nurse at every school, I think in response to the question that was raised to us, it's not a possibility at this time, and particularly not with these particular funds, and that to best utilize to the continuation of things like the program Project Reach that we've just heard, that these mental health coordinators and psychologists may be the best utilization for the funds as they go forth at this particular time. So thank you for the hard work that you all are doing in getting this prepared and for getting the funds in for this. Are there questions that any members of the board may have at this particular time?
Madam Chair.
Mrs. Powell?
Just to piggyback off of what you just said, yes, I have had even a social worker to approach me and ask we were hiring more social workers, because the school that she was actually working, well, several, they had cases of suicidal and of actually students cutting themselves. So having this in place, I think, will help us to remedy some of those situations, to actually have the funding to be able to add this. So just to piggyback off of what you said, I know exactly what you're saying.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Are we moving for approval of the programs or approval for submission of the grant?
I think we already have the funds, is that right, Ms. May? Ms. May?
This is, we're seeking approval to submit the application to the Department of Public Instruction, and then once it's approved, they will release these funds.
Okay, so what we need is a motion to approve the request for funding that we will be submitting.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
is there any other discussion? I'm sorry, I'm out of order by asking that. Does anybody have any others?
Well, I didn't hear any other, so we'll entertain a motion from you at this particular point in time.
All right, I apologize. Madam Chair, I move that we approve these applications for funding, and they be submitted to the Department of Public Instruction for PRC 169 and PRC 170.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen with a double second by Mr. Mercer and Mrs. Boyette that we approve the request to move forward with the application for funds from DPI for the expended for funds under PRC 169 and PRC 170. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote for the question. Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. The next item is the high school schedule.
Before we go to that, Dr. Fitch, can I ask a question?
Yes,
please?
ma'am, you may.
Mr. Farmer's Group, the Optimus Club, have been doing the ice cream in previous years. Has that been done this year? Because we were talking about student needs, and I thought about the many hours that students are doing virtual and remote. And I was just wondering, have they done any of the eye exams like they've done in the past?
I don't think so, because we've not been in school. That is not a screening that has occurred in individual homes. That has been a service that has provided within our classroom setting. So with us just having gone back, and I'm sure they have not done any screenings this year.
Do you think it would, any inquiry needs to be made if there's a way to do that? Because the needs of the children still exist.
I wish we could, because I've had several people talk to me about the need for glasses. And my grandson being one of them, even though he's not in this county, since they're spending so many hours on the computer doing remote learning. And it's just as a service, because we were talking about Project Reach, we were talking about using the money for student needs, and that could be potentially one.
We can inquire about that. I mean, some of those issues are outside, coming inside the school, or some of the requirements that we have, but we can look back on that.
I mean, with the vaccinations now, possibly, if the people volunteering to do that were already vaccinated, it might make it less risky.
I don't know if you heard Dr. Mills, Mrs. Barnes, but he said that inquiry could be made in that regard.
Thank you. It's just a thought.
Sure.
Anything else? Let's go to the high school schedule.
All right, let's swap the screen. Hold on. There we go.
Can everybody, Dr. Mills shared his screen. Does everybody see that screen in your place?
Yes.
Okay.
I see it a couple times.
You see it a couple times? Okay.
See a double. Board members and audience members, we have some information to walk you through about some of the reentry transitions, and there's two parts to this because of the governor's announcement. So we've got one piece that we'll walk you through that deals with where we are now, and then we've got another piece that we can share information as we know it now from the information from the Senate Bill 220, which is the return to school under the various different plans and some of the requirements of that. So when we started this agenda item, the decision had not been made yet until after the fact, so it was late on the 11th. So we've got a little bit of both in here, so I want you to be aware of that, and we'll point that out as we go through. Okay? All right, so Dr. Wilson, I'll kind of just go at this a little bit at a time, so I'll turn it over to her get us started.
So this first section on page 2 of the presentation talks about our current reentry plan. This is just a reminder of what was approved at the February 8th board meeting by each of the 3 levels. So that's all. There's no new information here. That's just a reminder of where we are. So now we'll get into our current high school schedule. This is, you'll see some data here about our bus ridership that Dr. Williams and Mr. Harvey collected. This is the average daily student transportation by the 3 comprehensive high schools. Now, the numbers may fluctuate a little bit or so or though, but we did take the numbers of the transportation of the days that they have been in school since those students have returned, and this is the average of that. And then our attendance, we did the same thing at the 3 comprehensive high schools. We have our students divided into 4 cohorts, and we took the average daily face-to-face attendance by each day, divided it by 4, and you see in the second column, the number, the attendance and the number. If we were able to move that into 2-day cohorts to where the students would attend 2 days in a row, of course, then that number would just double based on the current students. Now, that doesn't mean that families might change their mind. Some families may say, I'm not comfortable with my student attending more than 1 day, and then we could have some families to say, well, if we're going to increase a day, I might want my student to attend. So that's just a possibility. So on the table today, we have some options. And again, if you'll notice at the bottom of this screen, this is before Senate Bill 220. That's what Dr. Mills was talking about, that this presentation was started and what our options are prior to the 11th. So we have for high school to continue with 1 day per week, and Plan B, to stay in Plan B, is to expand to 2 days per week. And based on our conversations with different stakeholders, we believe that this could happen, this 2 days per week could occur as early as March 22nd, which would be next Monday.
I know.
Excuse me.
Go ahead, Mr. Mercer.
Dr. Wilson, if we go to the 2 day per week, do we still have wiggle room if a few more people opt in, we could accommodate it?
Yes, sir. When you look at that number, that slide on the attendance there, even at, like, say, our highest number is at Hunt with 152. That's significantly lower number of students than what the capacity would be. As long as, because the important thing to remember, in Plan B, we have to maintain social distancing. So with a 152 possibility, and thereabouts, adding students here or there, Hunt High School is large enough to maintain that.
Well, and the reason I ask is we want to make progress and steady progress.
Yes, sir.
I just want to make sure we can sustain what we do, because it would be worse to have to switch back and forth. But if we can sustain it and comfortable with that, I prefer the 2 days a week instead.
Well, Mr. Mercer, you're exactly right. And while we were very optimistic that our students would return, we wanted to be very cautious, and that's why we proposed the 1 day per week. And we just felt like that was better to then add additional days than to have to go with a whole bunch of days and then have to back off. You're exactly right.
I have a couple of questions. Are you saying that the bus ridership at Beddingfield is only 15 students on any given day of
That's
those.
correct.
That is correct.
6 at Fike and 14 at Hunt.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, those are not typos.
Are we going to be faced with fuel efficiency issues? How spread out are the routes for this ridership? And if you move to 2 days a week, you now have to redevelop a plan to know that A through D, because like A through D came on 1 day a week, E through, let's say, J came on another day of the week. How are you now going to combine those so that they are there 2 days a week instead of, because you did them on a 4-day basis?
Yes, ma'am. You're exactly right. There would have to be some additional routes reworked, but based on the numbers of students that we have on an average day, there wouldn't be the same as we would take a whole high school and have to reroute that. Mr. Harvey is on the line, and so I think he could probably answer that.
Those routes are completed.
Yes.
We've already go ahead and done that.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Fitch. To answer your question, the routing won't be as much of an issue because the way we route it, all high school students that are bus riders have routes. So it's just a matter of them being at the stop on the days that they're assigned to go to school. The main challenge will be for us will be capacity issues. As long as we're under Plan B restrictions, we have to stay under 22. But if we don't exceed 22, we can pick up whomever at their bus stop on a given day. So the students have already been routed, so that's currently in place. As far as fuel efficiency goes, when situations allow it, if we have low ridership on some buses, that does give us the ability to move students to one particular bus and take other ones off the road as we're not, so we won't just be running buses with nobody on them. That's something that we monitor, and that's why we look at our ridership every day, just to kind of see how we can move kids around in the most efficient, cost-effective way possible to try to avoid being wasteful. If they're not riding the bus, we'll just move kids to one bus if we can do that. When feasible, we'll move kids to one bus just to kind of save money in other areas.
So with this low ridership, what kind of time do we have our buses hitting the road so that we can know what time our students are out on the road waiting for a bus?
They're leaving around their normal times what they would do during a traditional school year. We haven't had to do anything, no one's having to leave exceptionally early or anything like that because the ridership has been so low.
Now, if 22 is the maximum number you can have on the bus, and if you have Beddingfield at 15 being transported daily, and now you're going to do some combination in terms of the numbers who are attending each day, are you going to be over that 22 projected number for Beddingfield, since they're averaging 15? And with Hunt, you're coming that's still over because that's 28. So when you're adding that extra day, help me.
How many buses are they
Those are
using
the
for
average
that
number of
15 would be
students,
the
not the
question.
average number of buses.
That's,
The number of students on a bus.
that
No.
number
But it'd
depicts
be,
how many.
it could vary by the number of buses we have out there. We could stay under the 22 that way.
Like some buses were only bringing in 4 kids. So that leaves another 18 eligible riders.
These were the average number of students
That's the total.
transported daily over
Yeah,
multiple buses.
that's not just one bus.
It appears to me that if you tried to use, because there were only 15, use one bus, they would be leaving so early to have such a long route. So to keep them from getting on so early, you have to use buses with just a few students on it, is what I would think.
But I guess it depends on their locations and where they live. But again, that 15 number that was 15 total and not just one bus.
Okay,
Yep.
but still 15 ridership per day out of a whole school is low.
Yes, ma'am.
The majority of our students who are attending face-to-face are using vehicles.
Okay. And so you have already done some partnering and pairing to see how you would do those 2 days a week as opposed to the 1 day breakdown that you had.
Yes, ma'am.
The takeaway is I don't think buses will be an issue and capacity in schools will be an issue. And then you've got transitional times, which is really probably one of the busiest times and densest times in a school, a high school, but those won't be a problem either based on going back to 2 days with the numbers that you have. Again, unless a large number changes, we're not seeing that, and that's why we took the approach to look over the first little bit. So this is very doable.
Okay, so if we go back to the chart that you have, the face-to-face for the cohorts, okay. So how would you make the combination of your cohorts now as opposed to the A through D and the,
So the group of students who have attended on Monday and Tuesday would be grouped together.
Monday and Tuesday?
Monday and Tuesday, and then the group of students who were attending on Thursday and Friday would then be grouped together on
Okay.
Thursday and Friday. Just like our middle school, we would follow that same pattern.
So it would, in essence, be a, like a group and a B group?
Yes.
Okay, blue or green or whatever you want to call it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you're combining Monday and Tuesday, and you're combining Thursday and Friday. We're maintaining Wednesday as the deep clean day. Question has been raised, and we heard it today with the letter that came from the parent, as opposed to being a 2 day or 1 day of having a week on, a week off. Has that been considered? Was that part of the discussion?
We have, if we would proceed on to the slide number 7.
Okay.
What I would say is if
There you go.
before we get into the changes from a 2 day a week to a week on, week off, I think we need to talk about the Senate Bill 220 because that's really going to be in effect. So the one decision point that we need to know, be reflecting on before we finish today is the board's thoughts on going ahead to 2 days per week for high school as it is, and we can start Monday. And that's a decision point. The other information we need to share with you is in preparation for information you're going to need to know for Senate Bill 220, which is the return to school. Because we're going to point out some things in there that you need to be aware of, but we need to get input and action on before we get too far down the road, because there's some timelines on that we need to point out with you. So one decision point is, does the board want to go ahead and go to 2 days per week? That's one piece. So
Is that something we need to take an action on?
you can, but I would say let's go to the next part, and then we can come back to that. But I just want to point out, remember when I told you we started, there's 2 pieces to this based on the change from the governor. So that's the one piece that was an easy piece of information to share. Numbers work, transportation works, all that kind of thing. Timing could be next Monday. So the next piece that we need to share with you is the information from Senate Bill 220 that's going to take some more discussion to be ready, but does have the impact. Okay, make sense?
Madam Chair,
Ms. Boyer?
I would be very much in favor for us to get them in school 2 days a week, starting Monday.
Okay. So we can, and you can take action on that at any time. The next piece is with the governor's action in the Senate Bill 220. As we'll walk you through it, there's some time constraints there that are required by legislation now, and some decision pieces that we need to know from the board. And I also think there's probably some input pieces we want to talk to you about, which is what we can do next. But our recommendation would be to go to 2 days a week for the high school as soon as possible.
Yes.
So we can loop back to that after this next discussion,
But
regardless.
The reason I was asking, I think, same Ms. Boyer also, probably. Is that something we need to have a motion on now, or do we need to hear further information?
I think you can do it either way. I would say let's go through the next part, so, because it's gonna, it all comes due at once, and there's some timing, whereas what I would recommend is we go ahead and make this change in preparation for addressing the governor's and legislative order, because the timing of that is going to be messy for us, and so I want you to see what that looks like.
So you want us to see what the governor is recommending before we take that, whatever action?
I'm gonna come back to you on this and ask you to vote.
Okay.
And make a motion, if you're willing.
Yes.
So we can go ahead and do this for Monday.
Yes.
Because I really think this is what we need to do as soon as possible.
All right.
The second part is, I want you to hear the other part before you vote, just because it's gonna affect some of your thinking, because there's some time delays with the governor's stuff that you need to be aware of. Okay? Yeah. There we go. Everybody with me?
Yeah.
I'm moving on. All right, so, go ahead, Dr. Wilson.
So we have included this slide and the very next slide, just to let you, as a reminder of all the different changes that we have had in this school year. Each of the dates there with a summary of all of those changes. And then the very next slide talks about the February 2nd, as well as the most recent change on March the 11th. The Reopening of Schools Act of 2021 that the governor and the legislators approved. So grades K-5 open under Plan A, check, we have that one. Grades 6 through 12 open under Plan A or B, check. Even if the board decides to make a decision to go to Plan A, you can, but the answer or the word between there is or, so check, we are there. Students served through Section 504 or through an IEP must be provided an option to attend under Plan A. That has not happened in the middle and the high school.
That's new.
We do have, in the elementary school, we do have that as a check, because they're in Plan A. So all students have been invited to be able to come face-to-face instruction all students. Now, at the middle school and the high school, we did have the adapted curriculum students. Yes. So that means that there's a portion of students who receive resource services with their IEP. So they are limited to, at the middle school, 2 days a week, and currently, until you make the decision, 1 day a week at the high school. So that is one of the bullets that we understand that we need to work on to be able to follow the governor's and the legislator's Senate Bill 220. And then the last bullet there is the provisions are to be implemented within 21 days of the signing. So we will make sure that that happens. So that's not yet, right now, but we will make sure we follow that.
Now, if the students who are served through 504 or through an IEP have to be provided an option, so that option can be that they attend under Plan A, or the parent can choose to keep that student virtual.
Absolutely.
That's what the choice is.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And in addition to that, everybody has to be offered a virtual option.
That's
in
right.
any event.
Yeah, we've got that on the next slide. We'll go through some parts of the requirements and,
So these are the requirements. Some of the things I just mentioned about the virtual learning. I mentioned about the IEPs and the 504s that must be offered under Plan A. And then we do have some additional reporting that Senate Bill 220 requires. We have a plan submission that we need to make sure we take care of, and we need to realize that the contract tracing could be a little bit different. And we must make sure this happens by April the 1st.
Okay.
21 days from March 11th, starts us at April 1st. And there's some pieces and parts about that I want to point out because of the timing in our calendar. So that's one of the reasons why I was prefacing everything with, this is gonna get a little bit muddy. But the reporting is tied to the ABC Science Collaborative. There's reporting goes along with that, it's required in legislation. Plan submission goes to the Department of Health and Human Services. And the contact tracing is still part of that, which we're already doing as it is. So that's not gonna change, but some of that will be reported to the collaborative. So those are some pieces. So what we wanted to get started today was to point out some things that will be important for us as we transition, and just to start laying out some things the board could consider. But I do think we need to have another called meeting on this next week, so we can have time to gather some input, and we'll share that in a minute, and go through some things, because this just did happen Thursday night.
So our options for the middle and the high school is to remain in Plan B, which is currently 1 day per week for high school and 2 days per week for middle. Or we could go to Plan B, to where 2 days a week for high school and 2 days a week for middle, which is one of the options that we just discussed in the previous slides. Or we could move to Plan A for the middle and the high school at 4 days per week. And in parentheses there, you notice that elementary, as a reminder, is already in Plan A. Or we could have Plan A, where it's 5 days per week for elementary, middle, and high. So those are several different options as a part of Senate Bill 220.
Let me ask you, with this last Plan A of 5 days per week, we have been using Wednesday as a deep clean day at all of our schools. We know that ventilation is an issue in some places. So what recommendation are you giving to us, or are you giving a recommendation to us in regard
We have
to?
that on the next slide.
Oh, well, I just won't let you get through the right slides.
We're
Okay.
trying to get there.
That just means that we're thinking alike. There you go.
Okay.
One, Madam Chair,
Ms. Boyette?
on the previous slide,
Yeah, can you
though,
go back?
Plan B, 2 days per week for high school and 2 days per week for middle, but we still must comply with everyone with a 504 and IEP.
Oh, yes.
Yes. That's a requirement regardless.
4 days.
These are options for the overall program.
Okay.
The requirements still must be met, yes.
Yes.
And trying to get it on one slide that shows everything is impossible to try and make sense. But yes, you're right. That's why we've got the requirements up here. That is on the slide before. That's non-negotiable on that part.
Yes, ma'am.
So where we are is right now to look at a process to go to Plan A for reentry involves some decision points. I'll just go ahead and, since you brought up the 4 or 5 days, we would recommend 4 days to continue the process we have of Wednesdays for cleaning, but also for our teachers to have time to prepare lessons for virtual learning as well as their own lessons in preparation. That is a lot going on for teachers' classrooms. And while we all want students in the face-to-face instruction as much as possible, as soon as possible, that 4 days has been something we've heard from our own staff and our own schools. And a statewide survey of superintendents had 75% of the school districts indicated they wanted a 4-day option versus a 5-day option, or at least the leeway to have a 4-day depending on board approval versus a requirement for 5 days. I think you're going to hear that from our folks. That's something that really is a concern, to go to 5 days with the level of virtual that we have going on. Sorry.
Well,
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Schwartz?
I don't know if this is on the next slide, but.
You gonna go too, huh?
Yeah, but the state board acted today and approved the 4-day-a-week as an option for Plan A.
That's not on the next slide because we were too busy working on the slides to get ready for the 4 o'clock meeting.
Okay.
But-
Well, that was, they did that at about 3:45 this afternoon.
No, that was about 15 minutes before he stops, that's good.
So as a part of the process to get ready, if the board, when we re-enter, that was something that Dr. Mills and I were talking about, is that whether the decision is to go into Plan A for middle and high school is in the near future or in the a little bit longer time, we're still going to need to follow some of this that we're talking about here, is that parental input at all 3 levels. While this is only talking about middle and high school, there could be a possibility that that there have a student that might be at the high school level who is on remote and is watching the students or their siblings at the lower level. And so now if they have an opportunity to go more days of the week, that may change a parent or a family's mind. And so we feel like that we need to ask our parents at all 3 levels where their thoughts are in the general ed population, as well as in the students who receive the 504s and the IEPs. And then we've just talked about the 4 or 5 days. It is important to note that Plan A does not require social distancing on buses nor in classrooms, but masks are still required. So that part of the process is the understanding of what Plan A requires and does not require. And then the last bullet there is just a reminder, is that our staff's vaccinations started on March 3rd with the first vaccine, and then our second vaccine is on March 31st. So those are the things that we wanted to consider.
In the April 1st information there, one conversation I've had with the health department is they would recommend a remote learning day on the 1st due to the day after the vaccination clinic for our staff members due to side effects from the immunizations being, vaccines being given. That was something they reached out to share. In considering the timing of the legislation, have to be implemented on April 1st, 21 days after. So that will be, as April 1st on our calendar, and April 2nd is a holiday or out of school day, and then we're on break, except for the early colleges. So the timing of this is really muddy for us to do that, but that would that still would have to be an option for those students with 504 and IEPs. Again, if you're going to go to a Plan A, and so the timing of all that is very, very tight. So that's why I wanted to wait till we got through all this about the high schools, because based on the majority of our calendar, majority of our schools, this would really go into effect if the board were to implement a Plan A when we come back from break for all of our schools except for early colleges. Because the timing of it is right as we go on to break. So it's a bit weird.
And our break ends on April what?
We come back on the 12th.
Dr. Mills,
Yes, sir.
the direction we've been given with the 21 days to implement the program within that 21 days, but you can do it sooner.
Yes, you could do it sooner.
Does that mean that we can implement the program earlier
You
and
could.
then miss the first?
You could, and then what I would say is that we need to know right away what it is the board wishes to do, especially if the board wishes to get some input from parents, as you've done in the past, about some of these things. Plus, we need to know from parents who would be wanting to come back and follow up for some other things that we've done. We still need that time, but it could be done quicker. But knowing that it needs to be done quicker, we need to know, like today, what plan that you would like to focus on, or as soon as possible this week, because all that backs up from the first. You're talking about just a couple weeks.
And I don't know that it was a day for everyone, but I think I read that once implemented, we still have although you have to notify somebody or
We still have authority
whatever,
to
but
do
we still have
closures.
some flexibility after it's implemented.
We do have authority to do closures of classrooms and schools as needed based on COVID incidents and staffing issues, which is the one we would have the most issues with, which was the concern on the first from the health department in reaction to the vaccine clinic. So that is still there. But again, all this it doesn't have to be done on the first. However, if we're going to do it ahead of the first, we really need to know some things right away to be able to do that. So,
Well, it appears to me to be in compliance, we need to implement it before then, and then
you could be
with health department recommendation stuff, look like we'd be justified in not having school on the first in the face-to-face form.
You would still be in compliance with it, and again, you could get some legal interpretation of that, but it is a lot of moving parts right there, right at break for that, and I would want families and the public to understand some of the timing of it is set by legislation and our calendar, so if you're going to do that, then we need to know sooner.
Well, in our original calendar and our updated calendars, we've changed remote days and all. So are we within those required mandated remote days that we had to have in? If we make April 1st a remote day, are we going to have to go back and now change the calendar again?
No.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Boykin?
Dr. Mills,
Yes, sir.
if we vote to bring high schools back on a Plan B, 2 days in, 2 days out, and knowing that middle schools are on Plan B and elementary's on Plan A, if we were to make a motion for the 503 and the IEPs to go back on Plan A, will we be in compliance as of this meeting?
You could make a motion now to do the plan 2 days a week for high school. That's strictly up to the board, and that will be easy for us to implement as of this coming Monday to give parents a chance to know and get notification out. The IEPs, students with IEPs and 504 is part of the plan. We'd have to ask parents that's the requirement, is that you ask parents what their preference is, so we would need time to collect that. And that would, I think, be a part of the board's motion about the Senate Bill 220, which is what you would like to do for that legislation. So it could be, as we mentioned, this is where it gets very confusing. It could be, for middle and high, several different options.
All right, well, I just like to say that, I'm in favor of bringing high schools back on a full Plan B. And I realize that the vaccines for our teachers haven't fully kicked in yet, as they're still going to be getting their second on, what was it?
The 31st of the month?
But after that, I'd like to talk in one of our following meetings about potentially going to a Plan A with them and middle schools. And I'll yield back.
I have a real concern about not requiring the social distancing piece, because we don't have that herd immunity. We don't have, our classrooms were never built with the distancing piece in mind, and that's still a major concern that I have. Hopefully the students will be keeping on masks and all, but the social distancing part is still problematic as far as I'm concerned. Ms. Boyette, hold on, Ms. Barnes. Mrs. Boyette has asked to be recognized. Ms. Boyette?
Going back to the social distancing one, if you've got 6 through 12 with 504s and IEPs in on Plan A, then that means that they are not, they have no social distancing.
Right.
And then the regular ed kids that come back during that time would be required to, so, how, that really doesn't make you, you know.
Yeah, that's why it's a little bit, it's a bit muddy around some of that. That's why I think the board, when you're looking at what plan you want to do, that'd be really hard to define both of those in the same building. I mean, what is different at the high schools is that students are transition between classrooms, whereas in the elementary, we tried to push in. But again, you've got plenty of space with the numbers we have now to go. Again, we can go to B right away, but with Plan A, the issue all along has been the minimum social distancing, which allows us to do a lot at elementary school that we could not do at middle high school.
Mrs. Barnes?
I was just ready for a motion, if it's permitted.
Well, go ahead with your motion.
And my motion would be to expand the high school program to Plan B, 2 days per week, as we are presently doing in the middle schools, with Monday, Tuesday groups being grouped together as one group, Thursday, Friday grouped together as a second group, and offering students with IEPs and 504 plans as required by Senate Bill 220.
I hope you wrote that down because I want to make sure I have the essence of what you have just said in this motion. Well, first of all, I'll ask if there is a second.
I'll second it.
Okay, so it has been moved by, no, I need to clarify first. Your motion is to expand the high school offerings to Plan B, being 2 days a week, with Monday and Tuesday being one grouping, Thursday and Friday being the second grouping, and what was the rest of it, please?
And offering students with IEPs and 504 plans as required by Senate Bill 220.
That should be offering Plan A to those students with plans.
Okay. And offering students with IEPs and 504 plans at all levels under Plan A as required by Senate Bill 220.
Is that set to start March 22nd? Or are we taking this in two parts?
That would be my, Madam Chair, I'm sorry, to the board. The question is the high school transition to 2 days a week, no problem doing March 22nd. Let's talk a little bit about the IEP and the 504 students, because we have to ask what their preference is.
Let me ask
according to legislation.
Let me ask Mr. Schwartz. Mr. Schwartz, since we have this motion, do I need to carry that? Do I then need to come back with the timelines as to when, or do I need to ask the maker of the motion if she is being inclusive, if she wants to be inclusive of those start dates as asked by Mr. Breen?
You could do any of those, or you could just consider this discussion.
Even though, okay, this is the discussion in terms of the motion having been made and seconded.
Right, the motion is appropriate, now you're in the discussion on the motion.
So I have to now state that motion for it to be actually on the table?
Yes.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by, I think it was Mr. Breen.
No, Mr. Boykin.
Mr. Boykin and Mr. Mercer, that we expand the high school offerings to Plan B 2 days a week, with groupings being the Monday and Tuesday assigned students as one group, the Thursday and Friday assigned students being the second group, and offering IEP and 504 plan students at all levels, Plan A option as provided in Senate Bill 220. Now, we'll entertain discussion. So, Mr. Breen's question was?
Well, Ms. Barnes, is the intent of the motion to start on March 22nd and, run through April 1st?
That's correct.
Okay, so you want Plan B through past April 1st? prior to and past April 1st.
Starting March the 22nd, I think is what was suggested.
Okay, and then no change after April 1st.
So now, no change after April 1st would be still with a Plan B.
Yeah.
May I offer a friendly amendment?
Let's see if she takes that as part of her motion. Did you get the gist of that, Mrs. Barnes?
I believe I did.
Okay, so Mr. Breen is asking, are you setting that time frame to extend beyond April the 1st, or with that time frame ending April the 1st?
Starting by extended through April 1st, I guess.
Okay, running from March 22nd to April 1st, without anything after April 1st. Okay, Mrs. Boyette.
I was gonna ask if, the high school change to 2 days a week could begin on March 22nd. And then the, Plan A for all 504 and IEP begin, on the first day after spring break, which would be April, well, not 5 day,
April 12th.
4 day. Plan A begin on the 12th. So the high school would come back 2 days a week, beginning on the 22nd.
Yep.
But then you would have time to contact the parents of the IEP and the 504 and let them make their choices and begin on the 12th of April when we come back.
They'd have to begin on April 1st,
Okay, they've got.
and no later than April 1st.
Okay, so,
So it's still back to Mr. Breen's timeline of the split high school, the 2 days, March 22nd to April 1st. And Mrs. Barnes's motion was offering the IEP and the 504 students at all levels Plan A within that time frame.
I would ask for a friendly amendment to shift the IEP 504 plans at all levels being offered Plan A to April the 1st, rather than March 22nd.
Okay.
So
Are
that
you
way
getting
we have
that?
time to
Are
make
you
that
getting
contact.
that, Mrs. Barnes?
Yes, and that was my intention, was for Dr. Mills and those to have time to get parental input, and so that students with the IEPs and 504 could be offered Plan A in the reasonable amount of time to comply with the 21 days. Am I correct?
Yes.
So do you accept the friendly amendment to expand the high school to Plan B 2 days a week with the Monday, Tuesday grouping, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday groupings to begin March 22nd and run through April 1st with the offering of the IEP and 504 at all students for Plan A as provided in the Senate bill to begin on April the 1st?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Chair, can I?
Dr. Mills?
Okay. I think it's clear that the board wants to go 2 days a week for high schools beginning Monday. So that was an easy solution. The requirements that we share with you that are part of the motion about Senate Bill 220 for students with IEPs and 504 gets a little bit messy because it's got to start on April 1st, according to the legislation.
I think we're there.
And that's what the friendly amendment was.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just discussion.
but isn't that a day of, we've decided to have remote learning,
If-
so.
If the board is okay with us doing the remote learning that day, due to the recommendation from the health department, from the vaccine clinic, then we would be able to begin that process for instruction for those students in a Plan A or whatever the parents chose for that particular group of students on the 12th and still be in compliance with the legislation. Richard's saying no.
No.
Even with the local flexibility to address COVID issues for a remote day?
No, because
It's in section 3, but I don't know, that's why I want to make sure.
Flexibility to address those and make day-to-day decisions, not to plan it weeks in advance, concerning whether to shift individual schools or classrooms that are providing in-person instruction to remote as necessary due to COVID-19 exposures that result in insufficient school personnel or required student quarantines.
Yeah, so what I was trying to anticipate is what the health department is telling us, which is we recommend a remote day that day after our vaccine clinic because of staffing issues, which we anticipate not being able to staff schools, to tell parents now for the first. I realize the wording of that language, and that's something we talked about earlier, but is there, I mean, I've got the health department telling me one thing, and I've got legislation telling me another that I know is going to be a pinch point for families to plan. At the same time, I don't want to be out of compliance with legislation, and I understand that, so.
Yeah, I don't think that would meet the definition in the law to make a decision this far in advance about individual schools. It's only individual schools or classrooms. You can't apply it to the whole calendar. And it's only in response to
We have 26
a COVID-19 exposure that results in insufficient school personnel or required school quarantine, student quarantines.
That's what I was afraid of. I just have a problem with the process when we're getting information from somewhere else that we've seen an issue that we can't handle ahead of time for families to be able to be prepared and for staff to be able to be prepared for that matter.
The
So,
staffing.
Richard, excuse me, are you saying that the first, no matter what we do, we're gonna have a problem not, having a remote day on the first would be a problem because even if we've implemented the program by that time, because they're not saying we have to have school on a particular day, they're saying we have to implement it by that time, but.
Right, if you've done it prior to April 1st, then I don't think you've got a problem.
Okay,
If
let me
you've
ask you
done
this,
what?
why
If we've
can't,
done what, put them back in school prior to the first?
I'm sorry, what?
I didn't catch what you were explaining to him. Say that again.
I'm not, go ahead, can I ask you to go ahead and restate what your question is?
well, what I was thinking was that the Senate Bill 220 says we have to implement it by that time, but if we've implemented it, then we've got the option of saying we need to have a remote day possibly. So if we implement the high school as we've suggested next Monday, and then go to the following Monday and implement the IEPs and 504, then they both are implemented prior to the first. And then on the first, request a day of remote learning because of the the recommendation of the health department.
can't do that part.
That way it's all been implemented, but it's.
No, you can do all of that, but you can't call off school in advance on April 1st because this bill is limiting your ability to call off school
We could amend the calendar to put a holiday in there.
to those circumstances. You can amend the calendar, you can amend the school calendar.
Yeah, we could
So
do
by
that.
separate motion, could we just make April 1st a remote learning day?
If you have everybody in school prior to April 1st, you can do that, yes.
Okay, so would 2 weeks be enough time, or 2 weeks from today would be the 29th? Is that enough time to check with the IEP 504 folks and implement it on the 29th? Do one on the 22nd, one on the 29th? We're back in, and then, if we have to change the calendar, just adjust the calendar to say.
I think we'll need to do something like that to be within the letter of the legislation, is what Richard's advice is gonna be.
Now, where does that leave us with Ms. Barnes's, motion?
Well, we're still doing friendly
No, we're
amendments
way
with
down
that,
there.
so we,
I think you should finish the discussion before you keep adding friendly amendments on to my
Okay.
recommendation. But let me ask a couple questions. Are you planning to deal with the middle school as a separate motion, or is this intended to be covering the middle school too?
They're already on Plan B.
But they also have to be on Plan A
For
for IEPs and 504s.
The IEPs, yeah.
Right. So the motion should be amended to offer all students with an IEP or 504 plan the option of Plan A.
That's what it did.
But I think that in the motion, originally, we'd said by April the 1st. And doing it implementing it on the 1st and saying it's a remote day is contradictory, I think, according to what they want us to do.
But her motion did include offering Plan
Yes.
A
Yes.
at all levels for
Yes.
those who have IEPs and
Yeah,
504s.
the date was the only thing.
It would just have to be effective March 29th.
That's what I'm
instead of
thinking.
April 1st.
You might want to, I don't know what the capacity is to deal with getting everybody who's got a Plan A option, and how long that will take.
We've got the numbers of students that we need to contact. That's manageable for us to do.
By what date?
I already have the numbers of the students who have 504s and IEPs by school. The one thing we have not done is cross-referenced the students who are currently in the number face-to-face, because there could be some of those. So if there's a number of 50 at a school, some of those 50 already may be face-to-face and given that option.
So the question is, I think the question is logistically for the administration, by what date can you safely say you can offer that option and be ready to go in school?
If the conversation I was going to have at this point, but based on what Richard was saying, was if we were going to do this and we have the issues with the first being a barrier and then break, then I would suggest that the board go ahead and talk today about, do you want to go ahead and do Plan A for middle and high school, make that decision, and then we could really push and get feedback on what we need to get feedback on for that group of families, but then we could start everything on the 29th.
And then have a remote day on April 1st, change the calendar to have a remote day on April 1st?
Well,
And be within the letter of the law?
You can do that, yes.
But I'm more concerned with getting away from that April 1st pinch point and then going right on a holiday and a week out, being confusing. But if we can contact the families that we need to contact, let people know what the process is for getting input about Plan A or Plan B, but if the board makes a decision to go to Plan A, then we can go ahead and start working today.
Now, when you say go to Plan A, which group are you referencing?
Middle and high school.
But you're talking about
You're
talking about all the students or the IEPs and 504s?
I am talking about all students.
Because I've been thinking about the 2-day Plan B for middle and high school and Plan A for the 504 and IEP students.
Yeah, that's why before we were running into the April 1st, which I told you I thought this would get messy, is, we definitely need to have another meeting about this right away, or if the board's feelings are clear about what you want to see happen with the schedule, then it's easier for us to begin planning on middle and high schools both going to Plan A, and then we address all of it at once.
Can you put the slide back on what is required by SB?
It's up there. The only thing we have.
The only thing we have to do is make sure that all the students with the IEPs and 504s have that Plan A offering, so that we could keep high school and middle on a 2-day schedule, Plan B. And that's what,
You could do that.
and that's what the motion was to move the high school students to Plan B, and expand it to 2 days a week instead of 1 day a week. And the rest of the motion was to offer the IEP and 504 students at all levels the Plan A option. And if we start that, the high school piece on the 22nd of March, and the IEP 504s on the 29th, then you are within the letter of the law, and then we could amend the calendar to put April 1st as the remote learning day. Wasn't that what part of that discussion was?
That was my thinking. Now, is there something else we're obligated to do at that time or just beyond?
I think my point was that the board can also choose to implement Plan A for middle and high schools, as well as to address the IEPs and 504 plans prior to April 1st for all, instead of doing a Plan B for high school, Plan B for middle school, and addressing the IEPs and 504s. You still have the option of implementing Plan A for middle and high school. I mean, that was just a discussion piece before you have your vote. You can certainly have a vote on another topic after this one.
Mr. Schwartz?
You're currently offering at the elementary school level
Plan A.
Plan A.
Yeah.
Okay? You're currently offering at the middle and high school level Plan B, but it's only 1 day a week.
1 day a week at the high school, but 2 days a week per grouping at the middle school.
So the only thing you're required to do by April 1 to be in compliance with the law would be to make sure that you're offering Plan A to everybody with an IEP or a 504 plan.
That's correct.
Okay? And that's the only change you're absolutely required to make by the law. So anything else that you do is reacting or responding to the desire to get kids in school more days a week, but it's not required by the law.
So what is the recommendation of administration?
The first one was to go back 2 days a week for high schools.
Okay.
And that ship is sailing right now. I think that at this point, if we're gonna look at students with IEPs and 504s as being under Plan A, it would be easier to also do middle and high school Plan A. I mean, we're already talking about going to 2 days a week and doing that. You don't have the social distancing requirements or the transportation requirements, and we've been doing it in elementary schools. Teachers will be immunized, or vaccines been provided to the 31st, and I think that's where we're going to end up. And I would say the timing of it is the hard part because of our calendar, but there's no one from an administration standpoint that thinks that we don't want to be back in school and have students back in classes. In many ways, it's much simpler to manage and provide for and predict. And I would say with the option to have 4 days now by the state board for our teachers to be able to use that day to plan and for us to do the cleaning, that really takes some things off the table that we're scaring teachers and scaring us, to be honest, so that we could provide for some of the things we're doing. The question is, what's the board's feelings on going back to a Plan A for middle and high school versus a Plan B in some combinations, because now we've got all these variations, especially with the IEP students and 504 students in there now.
My thinking on going to A, since we're looking at a spring break, when we return from spring break, that would be put teachers with the second shot and a week beyond, which that's when they say the immunization piece is in place. That's good timing health-wise.
That will be, if you're going to make a transition to Plan A for all, With the requirements we have from us, that would be an ideal time to do it because the vaccines will be done for those clinics and you've got time to get things ready. But again, you still have the issue with the IEP and 504, but our recommendation would be to go Plan A.
So in other words, then, Dr. Mills, all the high school students would go 4 days a week. Is that correct?
That's correct.
After break?
You could do it whenever you like, but the sooner the after break would be ideal because your vaccine has been completed that we provided, and then you've got a week off in between to do some additional planning and things we would need to do. But again, we've got to let families know and transportation do, routes are done at that point because you're coming back through, but, Dr. Wilson?
Yes, I just want us to make sure, what we're saying is Plan A for students with IEPs and 504s in a classroom of students who are also on Plan B. And thinking of my days as a teacher prior to COVID, that's going to be a very challenging situation to where I have some students in my classroom who have no social distancing that they have to adhere to, and then there are going to be students in my classroom who I have to keep separated because they're in Plan B. I think that's one thing as the teacher. I also think of as a parent to where I'm signing up for my student to come to school because my student may be a general ed student. So I would say my kid's coming to school in Plan B and allowed to do, or not allowed to do closer than 6 feet, but yet there are children in his or her classroom that is allowed to. I think that mixing in a district where we have elementary in Plan A and middle and high school in Plan B is doable because they're in different buildings. Mm-hmm. But when we're talking about in 4 walls of a classroom and trying to have Plan A and Plan B going on at the same time, I think it's going to be very confusing for the students. I think it's going to be confusing for the teachers. And I see to where my thinking is that April the 1st is where that pinch point is. Yep. Like, I think everybody seems to be saying that April the 12th sounds like a good day, but what are we going to do about April the 1st?
Change the calendar and make it remote.
That would be, well, if Mr. Schwartz says that we can do that, that's fine. But the other option is if we have to change the calendar, could we change the calendar to a teacher work day?
For April 1st?
For April 1st.
We do have the ability to do that in legislation.
No, you got the ability to do that prior to April 1st.
Yep.
Right.
But not
Can't do it on April 1st. Can't do it on that day, but you can do it ahead of time to plan for the process so it doesn't.
You would still have, under Dr. Wilson's scenario, you would still have to offer Plan A to everyone who's got an IEP or a 504 plan, beginning no later than April 1.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. But as long as you did it prior to April 1, you'd be fine to do whatever you want to do on April 1. Because then you would have everybody who's supposed to be in under the legislation in Plan A at the K-5 level, Plan B, 612, and everybody with an IEP or a 504 offered Plan A. As long as you did all that by April 1, you could do a remote day on April 1.
Okay.
But I don't know that you need a remote day on April 1 if you do all that.
We do need a remote day on April 1 because that's the day after everybody, or
It's
teachers
the
get vaccinated.
staffing.
Okay.
It's the staffing issue is where we are
Yes.
at a pinch point for April 1st.
We don't want 683 call-outs.
Right. So are you anticipating that because of side effects from the vaccine, you're going to have a staffing problem on April 1?
Yes, that is the recommendation with the health department. That is the word we've gotten. So that's the concern.
Okay.
So which does say in there somewhat about that.
I have a question about Plan A and the social distancing. Is it saying that we can't require social distancing, or can
It's
we?
minimal.
Plan A is minimal social distancing.
Minimal.
It's,
So, I mean, and that's, we can't require more.
Well, the difficulty in is that once we say that we're in Plan A, then that means that, like Dr. Fitch said earlier, our classrooms were not set up to have 25 to 30 students in there with 6 feet apart. So that's the difficulty in saying Plan A and social distancing if we have a full load of students in there.
Mhm.
Now, if we have only 6 students showing up in that classroom, we can be in Plan A with social distancing with no problem. But that could change based on the number of students in that classroom. So there could be some classrooms in our district that could maintain social distancing
And
under
some-
Plan A without any problem. And then there could be other classrooms that would not be able to, based on the dimensions of our classrooms.
Ms. Boyer?
If we say we begin Plan A instruction for all students K through 12 on the 29th of March, they come on the 29th, 4 days a week. They come on the 29th, they come on the 30th. 31 is the cleaning day,
And vaccine day.
And vaccine.
vaccine day. First, we either make it a teacher work day or
Remote.
whatever, some way so that it is remote. And then Friday's a holiday, then don't we solve all our problems? We've implemented
Richard said-
Plan A for everyone before.
yes.
No, that
That,
does.
that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to, add a holiday or trade off a teacher workday later on. Just let, any way you want to revise the calendar, you can do it, as long as you have those kids in school on or before April 1 that are entitled to be in school under Plan A. Those were the plan.
I suggest we do that, but there's already a motion.
There's a motion on the floor. A reminder that the motion was to expand high schools to Plan B from 1 day to 2 days a week. And instead of having 4 groupings, you have 2 groupings. Monday and Tuesday become 1 group, Thursday, Friday become the second group. And that you offer the IEP and 504 students at all levels. Plan A is provided in Senate Bill 220. And the friendly amendments focused on the 22nd starting the high schools, the 29th starting the elementary schools.
No, 29th starting those
I mean,
with
the
the plan.
IEP in the 504s, and then altering the calendar. So we've had discussion. Are you ready for the question? The motion is on the floor. Mr. Schwartz?
I'm not sure you've got the friendly amendments
Okay, let's,
all in there.
all right.
Are you,
I'm not sure my friendly amendment was ever adopted anyway.
no, it wasn't.
No, it
That's
wasn't.
that's
It
what I'm
wasn't.
saying.
It wasn't.
Can we start over and get, not, and
I
get
like
it
that one.
closed?
I like that one.
What?
Nothing.
So I'd like to make a different
Be not
friendly
present.
amendment.
Substitute motion for Mr. Breen?
Yeah, substitute friendly amendment.
Good Lord.
That we bring the high schoolers back 2 days a week, starting March 22nd, and then everybody back under Plan A, March 29th.
Okay, bring the high school back
To 2 days a
To 2
week,
days a week.
March 22nd, and then everybody back March 29th.
Under
Under
Plan
Plan A.
A.
Does that need us?
It
That's
has
a
to be adopted by
substitute.
Ms.
That's a-
Barnes and then adopted by the seconders.
Seconders.
I'm getting there.
Does you,
Well,
that was a motion, do you have a second?
That was a friendly amendment
That was offering
That
a
was a
friendly
sub-
amendment.
to the motion.
that was a substitute motion to her original motion.
Which would take,
So now we have to vote on, who did the second?
There wasn't one.
Well, and
There-
Velma hasn't accepted the second.
I would think.
You're you're offering this as a friendly amendment and asking Velma if she'll accept it?
Yes.
Or not as a substitute motion?
Okay.
Yes.
Mrs. Barnes?
Yes, I said that. A little while ago, I would have said that.
Say yes.
After all of this, okay.
Well.
Say yes, Candace.
And
Say yes,
Mr.
Candace.
Borkin and I, seconded it, and I agree with Ms. Barnes.
So let's see if I have this friendly
Oh,
amendment
Lord.
in correction.
I agree as well.
That we bring the high schools back.
You better. At this point.
I've got a question for Mr. Breen. I want to know who's on first.
Okay,
What?
well, let's bring it back home, y'all. That we bring the high school students back to 2 days a week, beginning on March 22nd. And that we bring everybody back on Plan A on the 29th of March. And therefore, that would be inclusive of the 504s and the IEP students,
Yes.
okay?
And
So,
then you would have the 29th and 30th under Plan A. You've got a day off for the vaccines on the 31st, and your recommendation from the health department is to not have school on April 1 in anticipation of staff being out from side effects.
That's correct.
is that all part of the motion now?
No, I'm
That
just
is not
asking
all
for
part.
clarification.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
So after we do this, then we have to change the calendar to make the remote? No?
Can you do a remote day because of staff being out or not? Would staff out?
Yes, can do, that was a recommendation. We can manage that, but
Okay.
they do not anticipate us having normal school. Whatever that is at this point,
All
but
right.
no.
So there is a motion on the floor that we bring the high school students back on a 2-day schedule beginning March 22nd, and that we bring everyone back on Plan A, and that is 4 days a week, correct?
Yes.
Beginning on March the 29th. Okay.
You need to determine if Plan A is going to be 4 or 5 days a week. Because you can do
I
either.
just asked if that was 4
Okay.
days, and all the heads nodded yes.
Okay.
Okay. So, do I have to state that again, Mr. Schwartz?
Not to me.
Okay. Thank God.
Good answer.
So please, let's cast your vote. Mrs. Barnes,
Aye,
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye,
Mr. Boykin,
Aye, aye.
Mr. Breen,
I'm just going to give one eye because I'm rubbing the other.
Mr. Mercer,
Uh,
Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
Dr. Fitch, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 6-1 with Dr. Fitch casting the dissenting vote. Now, that's the high school schedule.
oh, that's enough.
You all will handle the situation with the remote or workday
No.
or whatever. If we need to alter the calendar, let's alter it now while we're in here, and then we won't have to
While we
have
all
a,
understand it.
and then we won't have to have a special meeting, is that correct?
Not at this point.
I don't think we have to changed the calendar to move from remote to a remote day on the 1st. We've not been having to change that.
Oh, okay, then fine.
Based on health department recommendations, I think I've done that and just, I've notified the board.
Okay. So we will be
Good.
back in high schools. We'll start a 2-day schedule on Monday, March the 22nd, by the action that has just been taken. Monday and Tuesday, students will come on Monday, Tuesday, and the Monday and Tuesday groups will be combined to be Monday, Tuesday, and the Thursday, Friday groupings will be combined to come on Thursday,
Thursdays.
Friday. We are still maintaining a Wednesday across the system cleaning date, correct?
Yes.
And that everybody is going to be returning to a 4-day Plan A schedule on March the 29th.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Next on the agenda, the 2020-2021 budget amendments. Dr. Williams. That is Dr. Williams, right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will
I'm sorry,
turn it over to
Mr.
Mr. Stanley to go through our budget amendments.
I'm
for this
sorry,
month.
I was looking for Mr. Stanley, didn't see him, I got him there. Mr. Stanley, are you still here with us?
Yeah, I'm still here.
All right, good. If you will take us through our budget amendments that we need today, please?
I'm gonna share my screen.
Okay, get ready to get called up on the computer.
Yes, 1 second, Lord. Hold on. Stall for me, Art. There we go.
There we go.
Everybody's a comedian. Okay.
Okay. We'll begin with budget amendment number 106, Mr. Stanley.
State Public School Fund, we received, money for some reading camps for twice to retain student funding. And they did a sure up on the North Carolina Virtual Public Schools, which is why it's negative 20,000. What they do is they project back in August what they think North Carolina Virtual Public Schools will be. And then in February 28th, they sure up with actual data. So we lost about 0.3 of a position, which cost us $20,000. Overall, the state budget increased $5,848. And down at the bottom, you can see where it got budgeted, primarily salaries and benefits. That negative 100,000 and that positive 100,000 you see was funds that were transferred from the Corona Relief funds. And we went from 5,000 to 7,000 to assist with child nutrition.
Any questions? Next.
Next is federal. Federal side of the house, we had some additional funds that were received in the second installment, or just some additional money that was received. On one, we had a negative 12,264, and that particular one was where the planned allotment was less than the actual allotment, so they came back and made an adjustment for that. On that CARES Act digital curriculum, as well as the CARES Act learning management system, those were some grants, I believe, that Mr. Mayo wrote, and we got funds for those. And then the Children with Disabilities Risk Pool, if my memory is correct, those are for Pacific children, and you got to write and get that money as well in our EC department wrote. You got additional funding for some Pacific children. Most of those funds, as you can see, was budgeted for salaries and benefits. Some may have been for supplies and some contracted services.
Any questions? Next.
Next is, local special revenue fund. Pretty much that's to three things here. We received an additional $48,129 for the Medicaid Outreach Administration Program. Last month it was $44,000. This month it's $48,000. Hopefully we'll get some more money next month. And then the Board for that's 2 months worth of checks on that one. And then I was projecting what will take works may be at $75,000. The Board for budget salaries and benefits and Medicaid outreach. The Medicaid Administrative Outreach Program is budgeted for EC needs, and more pack works for tutors and some supplies.
Next.
Last but not least is capital outlay. We received $15,088 from insurance proceeds. That was, I believe, an activity bus that heavily damaged. And then you got $104,538 for lease finance purchase of school buses. That's just payments that have to be made. We don't make the payments. The Department of Construction makes the payments. We just have to be able to show it on our financial statements, which means we show it as a revenue and an expense. In order to do that, we got to get the money budgeted, or we could have a small violation of the statutes. But it's payment number 4 for 2017-18. For 18-19, it was payment number 3 on the leases, and for 19-20, it was payment number 2.
All right.
I believe that.
All right. Members of the board, what is your pleasure in regard to the budget amendments? Do you have any questions, first of all?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer?
I move we approve budget amendments, State Public School Fund 106, Federal Fund 304, Local Special Revenue Fund 806, and Capital Outlay Fund 405, as recommended by administration.
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the budget amendments for 2020, 2021 as presented by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please cast your vote. Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is the Rock Ridge, contracts requiring board approval.
Madam Chair, board members, we have several contracts. They're included in your packet. Mr. Mayo is on the Zoom call, could address some of these. Mr. Letchworth is on here, call about the lighting, and then Scribbles is the first contract involves digitizing the student and human resource records. That contract amounts for $175,000. That contract does still need to be reviewed by legal services, according to Brandon this morning. It says pending legal review.
I thought that we had already looked at that particular contract.
No, the Scribbles contract and the Creative Learning Systems need legal review.
Didn't Scribbles come before us previously?
I think because
On
this
the
is
digitizing?
for a different
For a
purpose.
different program,
Different program.
different contract.
Yes,
Okay.
we use them for some other things.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So that's one contract. The other is for Creative Learning Systems for the STEM lab at Hearn. That contract's the amount of $155,186.59. Trafera is business for the staff laptops, 330 staff laptops. That contract amounts to $320,217.96. Archangel for 1,500 student Chromebooks. That contract amounts $426,550. And then the last business is Musco Sports Lighting LLC for Fike High School baseball lights. Amount is $223,107.50.
All right, what is your Pleasure. Members of the board, do you have any questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Boykin?
I don't know if this thing's working or not. Can you hear me?
I hear you. I don't know if the others, can you all hear him who are remote?
Yes.
All right. The, Dr. Mills,
Yes, sir.
the STEM lab,
Mm-hmm.
with creative learning systems, yeah, we've got a budget here of $155,000. Is there any way that, in the future when we have projects like this, where we might could get a CAD program so that we can see what the inside of the classroom is going to look like, rather than us just blindly throwing $155,000 at it?
Sure. Mr. Mayo may already have some drawings of the layout of the labs. He's on the call. I'll ask him real quick.
Yes, we do have drawings that we can share. We had the architects come out, we did an RFP as well for this. So this STEM lab is a little unique. It will be inside the Hearn Media Center, and we're connecting it to literacy to make sure when we do the STEM activities, we're also pushing the literacy piece as well. But this is turnkey. This is the furniture. This is the computers and all the STEM equipment that will be used in the lab and curriculum. The students will also have portfolios that they will create from kindergarten all the way to 5th grade.
We can get you covered.
Well, I mean, I just know that, like, a lot of the, like in housing, when somebody's looking at a house, they can design what the inside of the house is going to look like, and it's almost 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it would be really nice to be able, for us and the public, to see, where these dollars are going.
Sure. We've got that, and we'll attach those from now on and get those to you. I remember seeing the one for Hearn, and it is in the media center. It's a nice setup, but certainly we can include those along with contracts for the coming.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, any capability of interacting with other classrooms, or will this be unique to Hearn?
Right now, it's kind of I won't say it's a pilot, it's phase one of our STEM labs. So we're going to invite other schools to come over once COVID gets over, be able to visit and kind of see, kind of build some capacity for this. This is a unique system because it's like I said before, it's got K through 5 curriculum built into it, but it also allows for flexibility where kids can come into the lab on days that they're not necessarily assigned to it, so they can actually do a little bit of a deeper dive into the STEM activities that are going on.
Okay.
And Hearn already has a STEM facilitator on site already.
Other questions or comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Brain?
I move that the board adopt the Scribbles and Creative Learning Systems contracts pending attorney approval, and the Trafera, Archangel, and Musco Sports Lighting LLC contracts.
Second.
Wait. All right, you moved Scribbles, pending contract, Trafera, and Archangel,
No,
Scribbles and Creative Learning pending
pending
attorney
contract.
approval.
no, pending legal review.
Legal review, I'm sorry, thank you so much. Pending legal review, and the other three?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Well, who was your seconder? Mr.
I
Mercer?
did.
It has been moved by Mr. Breen, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the Scribbles and Creative Learning Systems contracts pending legal review, and that we approve Trafera, Archangel, and Musco Sports Lighting as presented by the administration. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your response. Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Now we are down at the Rock Ridge Youth Athletic Association lease agreement.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Last Monday, March 8th, we brought to you a proposed Rock Ridge Youth Athletic Association lease agreement for board approval. As we stated in that meeting, this was in replace of a lease that had existed between Wilson County Youth Athletic Association. The Wilson County Youth Athletic Association is no longer in existence, but the Rock Ridge Youth Athletic Association is. At that time, we had discussions of 25-year lease and 10-year lease. I have received that answer, and that answer is to a 10-year lease. So we have for your approval tonight the 10-year lease for the Rock Ridge Youth Athletic Association. And there is a resolution that has to be adopted in order for that lease to be signed if the board chooses to do so. And I was going to turn that process over to Mr. Schwartz to discuss what had to be done there.
Okay. Madam Chair?
Yes, sir.
The Precy sheet should be revised so that the lease agreement in the first bullet point is for review, not approval tonight. It'll have to be separately approved after the resolution is approved, and once the resolution is approved, we have to put out notice for 30 days that we intend to enter into a lease for after 30 days. The notice will include the terms of the lease agreement, which is $1 a year. That does not have to be in the resolution, but what you need to approve tonight is the resolution.
Okay.
Giving notice to the public that you intend to enter into a lease agreement for 10 years on that property. And this also notice, the resolution also indicates that this property is not always needed by the Board of Education, and that we are willing to lease these athletic fields to the Rock Ridge Youth Association, Athletic Association, for use after school hours when not needed by the school for a proposed lease of 10 years. That's the resolution. Then there will be a notice posted that will include the amount of the lease, and then after 30 days, you can enter into the lease agreement. You can approve the lease agreement.
Madam Chair.
One second, Mr.
Yes,
Mercer.
ma'am.
So you're changing the language in the resolution?
No, not changing the resolution at all.
Oh, okay.
I'm just telling you, the Precy sheet should, in the first bullet point, where it
Yes,
says
present
that the lease is for board approval, it should be for board review.
Okay.
And you should add a bullet point at the end that the board, we need board approval of the resolution that gives notice of intent to enter into the lease after 30 days.
Okay. Members of the board, did you make those noted change in your précis that you're going to change the lease agreement is for board review, and that we're adding a fourth bullet that the board approval of the resolution is that the board intends to enter into a lease after 30 days. Correct, sir?
Yes.
And that's after 30 days from the passage of the resolution?
30 days after the notice is posted.
After notice posted. Mr. Mercer, you had a comment, please?
Hey, I have a question. On the resolution, the first whereas says that the
Yes.
property is in the city of Wilson. And should it say in the county of Wilson or in Wilson?
I suppose it should.
Please make note in your resolution, on the second line of that first whereas, instead of city, it should be county. I'd like to look at the
I have a draft that has that correct.
Okay.
Now, in the agreement, in the lease agreement, it didn't have it that way.
The recital, okay, I'm looking at the lease agreement.
Because it says it's an Old Fields Township.
Okay, all right, because these were sent to me this morning. Okay.
Dr. Bill, you saying you're looking at another copy?
No, I'm looking at lease, but I was looking at lease. I'm trying to screen share and do that too, so that's not. Get back. There we go.
And so in the fourth paragraph where it says that we're going to enter into a 10-year lease at its next regular board meeting on April 19th, 2021, that's assuming that this notice, that this resolution is passed and the notice is posted within the next 4 days.
Correct.
Okay.
Are you now, do we need are you ready for a motion for the resolution?
Need a motion to approve the resolution with that one change of city of Wilson to county.
To county, yes. Ms. Boyette?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the resolution for the Wilson County Board of Education, related to the Wilson County Board of Education and the Rock Ridge Elementary School property.
Second.
And that's with the change to county of Wilson.
With the change of the word city to county.
All right. It was moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mr. Breen, that we approve the resolution related to the Rock Ridge Youth Athletic Association in conjunction with Wilson County Schools for property in the county of Wilson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote. Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Boykin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. So now that the resolution has been approved, then we need to look at the terms of the lease. Is that correct, sir?
Those are, we can review that if you'd like. I can run through it very quickly with you if you'd like.
Is the only material change between the time it was first presented and this one, the 25 years to 10 years?
25 to 10 years, and then we'll need to change the date on the term of the
That's
lease as
Yes.
well.
Okay.
Okay. Did Brandon previously go through the change? Okay, then you don't need to go through the changes again.
So as long as we are understanding and you all are going to review that we're looking at the change from a 25-year lease to a 10-year lease, and we're looking at the difference in the date that the lease agreement would be entered into, and that's within 30 days of the signing, of the posting of the after the resolution. Okay.
I did have a, and I think it says it, but, on the third page at the very top, that ending of a paragraph at the top, it says, they shall not conduct business, on the leased premises unless it's, youth athletic or sports purposes. That would include them, the use of having a concession stand.
Yes, that'd be incidental to that.
I mean, and the only reason I ask is because it's not exactly athletic or sports, but it's understood you're gonna have a concession stand.
Correct. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jack.
Yeah. Thank you.
Gotta have someplace to buy it, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was not a.
Are there any other points that you would like to have addressed or dealt with your concern or question? Hearing none, we'll leave that to legal legals. Policies to be repealed. Members of the board, you have a précis that spells out the various policies that need to be repealed. As we have gone through our policy manual, there's about 7 or 8 of them. I didn't count them, but they listed them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
They're listed on the agenda, so you could have a motion simply to approve the repeal of the policies as presented.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mrs. Barnes?
I move that we approve the policies to be repealed as printed on the agenda and précis.
Second.
Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by, who was that first female, Mrs. Boyette, that we repeal the policies as presented in the agenda and on the précis. Are there any questions? Please record your vote in regard to this motion. Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Borkin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Barnes?
I move that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318, 11A, 1 and 6, and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statute 115C-402 and the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act 20 USC 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3. Second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Barnes, seconded by Mrs. Boyette. No,
That was Powell, wasn't it?
that was Ms. Powell. Sorry, seconded by Mrs. Powell. I see your little hand raised on the screen now. Thank you. That we go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and 6 and 115C-319 through 321 to consider confidential student matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A1 and North Carolina General Statutes 115C-402 and the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act 20 United States Code 1232G to establish or give instructions concerning the Board of Education's negotiating position concerning a potential acquisition and or lease of real property as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A5 and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11A3. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please record your vote, Mrs. Barnes.
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Borkin?
Aye.
Mr. Breen?
Aye.
Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
Myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned to closed session.